Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chai with Us podcast. This is episode number 56. I am Erica, the personal developer. You can also find me at Emotional Freedom.
Hi, and I'm Ivana from Local Isabel.
Yes, okay, very excited. Today, we are going to have an inspired conversation on this amazing book wrote by Brene Brown. I don't know if this is her first book or first work, but it's the most famous one. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited about this. If you don't know Brene Brown, she is obviously an author. She's a writer. She has amazing books besides this one. And she is a teacher. I don't think she's teaching anymore, but she was a teacher, a scientist, a researcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
She
Yeah.
did research on shame. It's just like she's just an amazing woman. I just love her
Yeah.
so much. Research on shame and vulnerability as well, amongst other things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
fascinated by this woman. I
Yeah.
love her. I heard about her on Louis House show, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. I love this book because I found it very relatable, and sometimes it was kind of felt bad in a way. And it's like, oh my God, I do this. Like she would say something, I'm like, oops, I totally have done this in the past, or I'm still doing it, or I didn't even know that this was something that was so important that I was doing until she pointed it out. So this book
Yeah.
was definitely eye opening to a lot of things that I didn't even realize were connected.
Like, what did you like the most about the book?
That I think a lot of it also was that she reaffirmed again some of the practices that you and I already do, like the gratitude journal that she talked about, how
Yeah.
important that was. And she also mentioned spirituality and how that was a factor in people that were resilient. So I love that aspect of it too.
Yeah, I love the fact that she shares so much, and it's amazing. Like she practices what she preaches, and
Mm-hmm,
just she's just who she is, and she's not
mm-hmm,
pretending to be perfect or anything. So every time she explains something, she's telling a story. It's usually a story about herself, and for me,
right.
that's really like I really admire her because it's so hard, to come up and just tell stories about your life,
Mm-hmm,
especially the shame stories.
yes.
Like what I found like very interesting about this is that so basically courage, compassion, and connection are the
Mm-hmm,
gifts of imperfection, right?
yeah.
Because and I really love the concept of being vulnerable and talking about things
Mm-hmm,
to help you cope with shame.
yes. Yes.
And this is a topic that it's really close to my heart
Mm-hmm,
because shame is not exclusive of somebody who has been through trauma, and
right.
she mentions that in the book. But I do have a very strong connection with shame because,
Mm-hmm,
as we know, people who have been through trauma, especially trauma within the family, we
mm-hmm,
suffer from this like shame complex, right? It's just
yes.
like almost all of us, we lived in secrecy, abuse and secrecy and everything, and we live in
Mm-hmm.
shame. And one of the ways to liberate you from shame is to actually talk about it.
I think what I really liked about it is the quote that she says, shame hates it when we reach out and share it. Because
Mm-hmm.
then we're not living in secrecy anymore, and people can offer us some guidance or just an ear to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but do you remember that example that she gave of her giving the talk at the school and how awful it went?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she called someone and she mentioned all the things that she didn't want the person to share. And I felt so bad because I've done some of those things. When somebody has called me, I'm like, okay, like we're gonna go beat them up, or like we're not gonna do this. And because you just
Yeah.
want to be, I think people in general want to be supportive, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they don't know how they can be supportive instead of just listening and being there.
Yeah, or you're so focused on whatever you want to do that you kind of disregard the other person. That is
Yes.
the example that she gives is when she was about to give a talk, this woman just came to her and told her pretty much how to do her job.
Yes.
And what she asked her to do was not her at all. Like, that's not
Mhm.
how she works, that's not how things go. She has a totally different approach where she talks about what we usually don't speak. And she spoke about, let me look for the sentence because I don't want to say it wrong, but she said something about we already know what to do, but
Yes.
yet we don't do the things we do.
Mhm.
And mainly because most of the times we don't speak about the things that get in the way of us doing those things.
Right.
So that's what she talks about. And the woman was just asking her to do something different, and she did it. And it went
Right.
just badly, and she felt shame for
Yeah.
it. And yeah, it's beautiful that she shares this so openly. and
Mhm.
and the weight was not as heavy once she shared it with her husband, which is something that happens
Yeah.
when you actually share a story of shame. It's just like
Mhm.
it's not that heavy anymore all of a sudden, right?
Right. It feels like a relief has been lifted.
Yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The other thing that like totally like made me think about my life is too is then she talks about how when we want something to happen, we pretend that it's not a big deal because if we don't, do you
Oh,
remember that part? And she said when you
yes.
really want something badly to happen, we pretend it's not a big deal so that if it doesn't happen, we won't feel let down.
Yeah,
Well, doing that creates isolation, and I didn't even realize that that's what happens. But
yeah,
she's so true. Like I've done this in the past with like a job that I've wanted, and before the interview, I'm like, oh, okay, if it goes bad, I won't be hurt because I don't really want it as bad enough. But it's a vibe you're then projecting in the interview, and it makes it seem like you don't want the job. And so then, when we don't get it, we've already told people, well, we didn't really want it. So then they can't come and comfort us, which is really what we need.
yeah, exactly. And I love the example that she gave again. Like, once again, amazing. This woman is amazing, seriously. And yeah, it's true. And people usually advise you against sharing with people, the good stuff, because that's
Right.
that's a real thing. No, how many people have told you before, like, don't share it because otherwise it will jinx it or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's solid advice. And sometimes I do this. I totally do
Mm-hmm.
this. I don't say, I'm like, oh, whatever, so if I get it, then I get it, and then I'm like suffering by myself because I
Exactly.
didn't tell people that this was important for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so we hide so many times. Like, it's
We do.
crazy how much we hide in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
um, I liked also the fact that she made the distinction between shame and guilty
Okay.
shame and guilt. And I love that she made a distinction because sometimes we kind of get confused in those two. And she's like, the whole book is about shame, the whole book is about guilty, and everything. I think it was good for her to just explain to us that when you feel shame, it's something that you have like against you. And the example she used was, oh, I did something bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm guilty, right?
Right.
And I am bad. That's shame.
Yeah.
And shame usually leads to like destructive behavior more often
Mm-hmm.
than guilt.
Yes.
And this is, I don't know, sometimes we just feel things and we don't even think about what we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling. Um, and when I was in therapy, I had a brief time in therapy. And it made me think a lot about like, okay, let me stop and try to figure out what is it that I'm feeling, because sometimes we don't even
Mm-hmm.
stop. Yeah, we kind of
Yes.
feel, right? So my heart is racing, blah blah blah. I'm feeling anxious. Yeah, but why?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what
Exactly.
happened? What happened? What happened?
Yeah.
So I think it was amazing, and she has a very simple way of explaining what things are. and
Mm-hmm.
and I love to see the reflection of like, okay, so this is shame, so when do I feel shame? And
Right.
such a beautiful work to do, right? To figure
Mm-hmm.
out when we feel shame, why we feel shame, and share it with people and
Yes.
being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. She also talked about how like we tend to numb things so we don't feel the shame because we don't want to experience it. And she
Oh,
not just mentioned, are you okay?
yeah, that was my telephone.
She not just mentioned good that that we numb with alcohol and drugs, but it can be other things like maybe shopping or too much exercise or
Mm-hmm.
being like really into our work and all these things we can use to numb like ourselves so that we don't feel these feelings of shame because it feels uncomfortable
Yeah.
to feel them.
Yeah. How do you numb? Do you know?
Um, how do I numb? I think through alcohol for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Or I
not
used to a
sure.
lot when I was working in a job that I didn't really like. Like I would just come home and just drink because that was a way to like not make it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, feel so bad.
I think I have the tendency to pretend that everything is okay. I
Okay.
just keep doing things, you know. I numb by keeping busy. That's what I do
Okay.
usually. I'm like uncomfortable, and then I'm like, let me just grab this book over here and pretend that I'm doing
Yeah.
something. I think that's how I do. That's how I numb
Mhm.
sometimes, like to just grab a book or
Yeah.
study, just do something so I don't
Mhm.
have to think about
To
things.
feel it.
Whew.
Yeah.
Luckily, I don't do that like so often now, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
because oh my god! And sometimes, did you notice how sometimes we can do something that it's actually apparently good, but we're doing it for the wrong reasons,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you would say, "Oh, you're studying. You're so cool. Like you're
Right.
studying." But no, I'm just numbing my feelings away.
Exactly. Yes. And something that she mentioned that I had no idea was related. She talks about how one of the ways that shame sneaks into our lives is through perfectionism. And I that was so
Yes.
mind blowing to me because I've never correlated those two things together at all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But
Because
now that she said that, it makes sense.
it makes sense. The thing is, like, what we do to ourselves, we do to others,
Yeah.
right? And we want to be, if we want to be perfect all the time and criticize our other people for not being perfect or not doing things right, like, it's just like there's something wrong inside us, right?
Yes.
And she
Yes.
talks a lot about this thing that, you know, oh my god, and sorry for just swapping subjects over here, but there's just too much knowledge. I don't know if we should go in order, but like when she, now I forgot what I was going to say. Love when she talks about I'm sorry, I have teacher's brain. when
It's
you
okay.
when you the thing about you cannot love someone if you don't love yourself, like,
Yes, I wrote that
oh
down. Absolutely.
my god,
Yeah.
and this is
But
like
that's
such,
so true.
it is such, isn't it, isn't
And I
it?
think we've talked about that in one of the past podcasts that we've done about the people that we attract. And so, if we don't love ourselves, we're going to attract people that don't love us because that's
Yep.
the vibe that we're projecting. Because we're willing to accept less than, or we're willing to be mistreated because that's what we think we deserve, and it's not what needs to happen. But yeah, she talked about that how to experience love and belonging. We have to believe in our worthiness to receive it.
Mm-hmm. You know what? Just like I cannot tell someone that, you know what, you don't love yourself, so you cannot love others. Who am I? I cannot tell you that. But I really thought I knew how to love. Like
Yeah.
seriously, I had this belief. I did not love myself, but I would do everything for everyone. I will
Mhm.
always be there, you know?
Mhm.
And I really thought that that was love. That was love. And then I was like, no, girl, you have no boundaries
I was just
whatsoever.
about to say, like
You
boundaries
are
are like the number one thing to establish like a sense of love for yourself.
right. This is
Yeah,
crazy. And now I'm like, no,
but
I didn't love everyone. I
don't
didn't
you
know
think
how
like as
to.
children we're almost socialized by our parents not to love ourselves in the way that like let's say we don't like something or we don't like a person, they always tell us like, oh, like make sure you tell them that you love this gift or that want to hang out with them, or like you have to
Yeah.
feel sick in order not to go to something, even though you don't want to go to it or you don't want to do it. But it's like your parents teach you that that's the only way to get out of doing something that you don't want to do, instead of simply saying no and that being acceptable.
Yeah. We don't learn these things. We didn't learn these things.
No.
I think that this generation right now, I think they're like a little bit ahead of us
Okay.
because they got a little bit of heads up when it comes to, setting
Yeah.
boundaries and saying no. No means no, right? I
Right.
think we came a long way. Like we are in our 30s, and I
Hmm.
think that I feel that our generation, my boyfriend's generation, he's in his 40s.
Hmm.
These conversations weren't happening,
No.
and right now they're happening,
Absolutely.
so this is good, but
Yeah.
I
Because
didn't
it
have
made it seem
examples.
like boundaries are a bad thing. Like when you say boundary, when I first hear the word boundaries, like I automatically think something negative instead of believing that they're actually beautiful. Like I think it's essential to have boundaries in order to love yourself.
I think it was, oh, either Lisa Nichols, I think it was her. Yes, I think it was her. She, it was something on the terms that when you are setting boundaries, you are telling people how to love you. You
Yes.
are giving them directions. It's not like you are
Hmm.
being like rude or something. You are just letting,
Hmm.
like, wouldn't you love if I told you, listen, Ivana, I really don't like when you do that, instead of
Right.
me being mad all the time because you do that and I never told you.
Yeah.
What the
Hmm.
hell, right? So,
Yeah.
hmm.
I agree.
Okay,
She
so.
also goes in and talks about what makes people resilient and how they overcome certain adversities in their life. And she
Mhm.
talks about, like, they seek help, they have social support, but the main thing that she found out is that they have spirituality. And I thought that was very fascinating that she talks about that. And then she says that spirituality is a way of recognizing that we're all connected to something greater than us, and that it's rooted in love.
Yeah, and
So I
and
like that.
I really, like, when she talks about spirituality, like at the beginning of the book. I don't know if you remember, but she was like, "I'm a scientist. I don't like what the hell is going on." She was doing some research on living a wholehearted life, right?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden she was like, I'm doing none of this. I am doing none of this. And she went to therapy to figure out how to do more
Yeah.
of the things on the list.
Yes.
And it's amazing how things change.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
like for me, I was complete atheist.
Uh-huh.
Atheist. I didn't believe in
Atheist.
anything. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, we die, that's it. And I didn't believe it. Like most of the things right now, like I didn't believe in any of this. So I was like, so it was so relatable because that was me. I saw
Yeah.
myself in her.
Hmm.
And then we start to dig in, and it becomes our way of living. It's like so crazy.
Yes, absolutely. She says that. She says that like she believes in the yoga principles, even though she's never practiced yoga, but she follows
Mhm.
them. And I just love how authentic she is. So here she is, and she's saying that like I believe in these principles, even though I've never been to a yoga class ever. And that's true. Like you can live a yogic lifestyle without practicing yoga. Like asana, the postures, is just one aspect of
Yeah.
yoga. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Just because you don't do yoga doesn't mean that you can't practice a yogic lifestyle.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, it's not like you don't do yoga. Like, to do yoga is not to practice the postures. So, if you practice the
Hmm.
principles, you are doing yoga. Yeah.
Yeah. She also mentions, do you remember when she says that when she tried to meditate, she felt like an imposter?
Oh, I didn't get to that part. Damn.
Yeah.
You're spoiling
Yeah.
it for
So,
me.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's
But she
okay.
says that like when she tried to meditate, she felt like a poser because she's just like, I'm not doing it right. And I think a lot of people feel that way about meditation. I know I did at the beginning. I was like, I'm just sitting here. I'm not supposed to think of anything. What are we going to have for lunch? What am I doing after lunch? What's for dinner?
I'm not doing it right.
Am I doing this breathing thing right? Like, oh, okay, focus on my breath. Okay, focusing on my breath. And it's like, okay, I really hope we have those like okra for lunch today. You know what I mean? Like, It's what I tell people when they were at Pulchati. Remember the first walking meditation that we did? We went to the river and we sat on the
Mhm.
rocks and you're supposed to meditate. And the entire time you're meditating, all these like raptors are coming by. And
Mhm.
sometimes like they're quiet and they're respectful, and other times they're shouting and like, "Hey, how are you? We hope you like India." Like, just shouting at you, trying to get your attention. And it's really difficult to meditate when there's somebody shouting at you, trying to like make a conversation. And I
Yes.
always tell people like, think of these raptors as your thought. It's a thought that's coming by that wants to pull your attention out of the meditation. And when you do that, it almost gives you like a clear example of like, oh, okay, this is how my meditation, what it looks like. It's these raptors coming by, like my thoughts. Just
Hmm.
some of them are peaceful and good and don't pull me out of my meditation, and others like just pull me out. So yeah, I love that she shared that because it was a good example for people that don't meditate or are starting
Hmm.
out meditation.
Yeah, I mean, just give it a try and see how it goes. I gave it a try and my life just became better.
Mhm. Mhm.
I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
Like, since we had a lot of conversations on this podcast about the sense of belonging, it's just like one of
Okay.
our biggest conversations ever. What did you
Yeah.
think about her approach on belonging? Like, her approach is like belonging is like the most important thing,
Mhm.
and belonging is love, um, and she had like this extreme um, love belongs to belonging.
What does it say? Love belongs to belonging.
Love
What?
belongs to belonging.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
quote from that. The
Yeah.
absence of love and belonging will always lead to suffering.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think about it?
I think it's true, but I think again, it starts off with the self-love. Like you have to have love for yourself first before
Mm-hmm.
you can love others. And something that she also mentions is that we have to accept the darkness within us because
Yeah.
the darkness it doesn't diminish the light. It just like what is I forgot what the word is that she uses, but she says that it encompasses it or it makes the light more clear. So I
Mm-hmm.
think like we have to face our own selves first before we can
Mm-hmm.
feel like we belong to something. And belonging necessarily like doesn't mean that you belong to a certain group of people. It can be like,
Yeah.
it can mean that you belong to a greater good, like this, which talks about spirituality, that like there's something greater than us. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes those people resilient is because they felt like they belonged to something greater than them.
Yeah.
What
Belonging
about
is
you?
such a huge topic
It
for
is, yeah.
both of us. And for me, when she said something on like we can only belong when we embrace ourselves, it got me thinking because I realized that even though I already knew this, I didn't, stop think about it. And it was very interesting to realize that I was struggling a lot with the sense of belonging because I wanted so much to belong. But
Mhm.
then I embrace myself and I'm like, F this. I belong
Yeah.
wherever I am. I belong to my
Mhm.
friends, well, quote unquote. And yeah, and it's true. When you embrace yourself, that's when you get the sense of belonging.
Yes.
Because if you don't love yourself, it's not because you are from Madrid that you have this amazing sense of belonging. Like it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I do agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
not a place, it's not a thing. It's something within
Mhm.
ourselves. It has to do with our self-love.
Mhm.
And I really love this all idea. It made me think a lot. This is
Mhm.
turning into a very long conversation. I'm not sure if we are going to have part two, but
Okay. We
but
might.
we might. I think we might
Yes.
have a part two because there's I have listened to half of the book and I was stopping every minute to take notes. And it was
Yes.
like either I listen to this book and I don't grasp everything that it's going on, it's so valuable,
Yeah.
or I stop and actually pay attention and take my notes. So I
Mhm.
chose the second option. So maybe we have part two of this because the
I think so. I think
conversation
that's a good idea.
is interesting. What do you want to ask our audience today?
Um, Good question. Hold on a minute.
No, I'll let you go through your notes. Oh my God, it's Jose. I'll let you go. You're so good with the questions. I'll wait for you.
I want to ask people, like, when in your life have you had to establish a boundary, and have
Mm.
people accepted it? Did they follow it? Like, how did that boundary help you establish a sense of love within yourself? And maybe if they're comfortable to share a shame story and what happened.
Ooh, that's why I love you. You know, you have the right questions. And let me tell you one thing. I forgot to tell you this, but I think you are the perfect example of vulnerability,
Okay, how
because
so?
you like to share stories that are embarrassing, that may
Yes.
be embarrassing for people. Like, you're like, whatever, I'm just going to share this. And it's true, because I was
Yeah.
listening to this book and I was like, Ivana is a very good example of that. There you go.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
everyone. You're welcome. Like, share, comment, do your thing. Show us some love, and we'll see you
Yes.
next week.
Sounds good. Bye.